Hello and welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Chiropractor. It's your host, Patrick Hogg, and we're going to go over and have a conversation with another chiropractor today who has been in practice for 25 years. He's a fellow ACC graduate who graduated in 95. He's originally from Northern Ireland. I didn't actually ask where your practice was.
Yeah, my practice actually is down south in County Cork, but I'm from Belfast originally. Yeah.
There you go. So he's currently running as a solo doc, but he's obviously had associates come and work for him in the past. So he's taken a lot of chiropractors under his wing. He's helped them progress through, but is now working as a solo practice himself. He actually, he practices a specific technique. So many of my patients already know I use the activator in the clinic, but he is a sole activator-based chiropractor. He also is a family man and he has 4 kids, 10, 13, 15, and 17. So I think actually big families are one of the biggest life achievements. And I know that we're going to get some really interesting information. I've met Ed through my inner circle, and despite the fact that he's been in practice for so long, and one of the things that I really admire, and we were just having this conversation before, despite the fact that he's been in practice for 25 years, he still wants to learn more. And in fact, he told me several months ago that he's never done a YouTube video. He doesn't even know how to open Facebook. And I can tell you just observing this guy from a distance, that even though he's been in practice for 25 years, he's still willing to learn. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come over and talk to Ed today, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself, give himself a little bit more of an introduction, because I know I would have missed so much information. Welcome to the show, Ed.
No, you got most of it. So yeah, I'm born and bred in Northern Ireland. When I left school, I suppose as a typical 19-year-old, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I hadn't done very good at school. So I ended up going to university in Bristol, and I did engineering for the sake of that was the only course that would really accept me. And it was while I was going through my engineering degree that I realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to do engineering. I wanted to do something more, but I actually had the fortitude or the fortune to meet a distant relation of mine who was a chiropractor. And when I saw him working, I saw his enthusiasm. I saw just the way he could change people's lives was brilliant. It was just, I fell in love with that. And so then I went from there, went to ACC, did my chiropractic degree there, and then qualified in 95, went and worked for him for a couple of years. But I suppose when I'm working as an associate, I quickly realized I wanted to go on my own at some stage. And through the jigs and the reels, I ended up in Cork. I just bought a practice off a friend of mine who I was at college with. And it was one of those decisions where I thought, well, I'll stay here for a couple of years and then I'll probably move. But as you mentioned, yeah, you get married and have 4 kids, and 25 years later, you're still stuck here. So yeah, I'm not going anywhere. So that's pretty much how it wasn't the miraculous sort of, one adjustment, I was in agony type of thing, and that's how I found chiropractic. No, it was very much, I was attracted to what chiropractic had the potential to do, and that's what I really sort of pulled me into it.
That's really interesting, because obviously being that you started as an engineer, actually one of the most famous techniques in chiropractic was actually designed by an engineer, which is Thompson technique. And Thompson, he was quite good friends with BJ from what I remember, and he had a problem. He had an accident, and he injured his neck and both developed neck pain and diabetes at the same time. And he went and saw a chiropractor. And within a couple of weeks or a couple of adjustments, not only did his neck pain go away, but his diabetes also reversed as well. So ironically, he developed health implications from an injury or a trauma, which actually led to systemic issues. And actually now pretty much all chiropractic tables within our profession are fitted with the pieces that gentleman then invented. So it's really interesting how, so many people, have this skill set, but actually it still transpires or transforms. And again, like that mechanical brain can really serve you. So I know that we're going to get some really cool conversation going in a second. So obviously you've just told us how you got into chiropractic. So there was nothing crazy or special that kind of pulled you in, but obviously you probably had some really amazing experiences with some of your patients. So maybe you can tell us, some of the experiences that you've had with chiropractic and some of the things that you might commonly see.
That's a very interesting question. I think the whole beautiful thing with chiropractic is just the potential. It's almost like we're on, it's like a Christmas present when you're unwrapping something, to actually see the potential in patients, whether it's it's a baby with colic, whether it's someone who has MS and things like that. And it's just, to me, that I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned the longer I've been in practice is, I think when we come out of from college, you sort of have this sort of attitude that, we need to fix everything, that we need to be the hero. And it's taken me years and years and years to realize that you can't fix people. It's not up to us. We can't play God. All we can do is just remove interference and then let the body sort of work its way. And that I've been a pretty slow learner with that, because I think all the way through it was trying to, fix and cure people. And yet that takes a huge burden of responsibility. You become responsible for the patient, not to the patient. And that's a big, big difference. I think it was Stu Bittman, one of my mentors, who said, he can't cure a ham, let alone cure a shoulder. And that's so true. And that's really, really what it is. And it's just, I think so often, particularly, as I said, as younger graduates, we have so much pressure on ourselves because it's our responsibility to fix them. And we can't. If someone's lifestyle is not good enough, it's going to slow that process down. And I think that's one of the things actually we'll probably get onto later on in this conversation, is this whole sort of, coronavirus period from there. I think hopefully what it's going to do is going to make people have a very different conversation about health.
I really hope so. I really hope so. Because we can't every single time something like this happens react in this way, because we are that's the only word you can use for this is react. We're being reactive. We're almost saying that we have no control over this situation. And of course we always had a control. In fact, the government have proven that we have a control on this situation, because we've slowed down the spread by not constantly touching each other, or and this is only one arm of preventing disease spread, by the way, is not contacting or not touching each other. And this is a very, a reactive way of doing things, but we've got to look at the health of the individual and how well that someone can respond to these kinds of threats. Because at the end of the day, the human race has lived on the planet for, we've been here for centuries, yet all of a sudden we're panicking about something that has been around for millennia. Like, viruses and bacteria are not a new thing. They've been here forever. And actually someone described this to me really, really well. And actually was what you basically were saying about health expression. And, we all know that someone's got the huge potential inside of them. So someone described it to me like, you imagine Elton John, who is like the perfect piano player. Everybody has that perfect piano player inside of them. But if you stick him on a piano that is not tuned properly, it doesn't matter how good the piano player is, it's still going to sound crap. And this is the thing, is if you imagine your piano like your environment, if you've got a crap environment, it doesn't matter how good the inside is. Because the thing is, we all have this inborn intelligence, like this huge potential inside of us. Yet, if you're not letting it actually be put onto the right environment, you're never going to get the sound music. And that health expression will never be there. So I thank you for sharing that with us. So maybe, because obviously this is the thing that we want to be able to help our listeners with, is actually being able to take control of their health and not be able to blame the external environment, but actually, have some control. So one thing that I notice about pretty much every chiropractor that I've ever met, and it doesn't matter what their philosophy is, they generally are very good at taking care of their own health in more ways than one. So maybe you can tell us some of the things or some of the rituals that you have that help you to keep your health in check.
For me, who was it? I think was it Tim Ferriss? I think once said, if you win the morning, you win the day. To me, and this is particularly, having 4 kids, I find that if I don't get things done earlier in the day, they're not going to get done. So for me, routine is really, really important. So I'm an early bird. I get up between 5:30, 6 every morning, regardless whether it's Monday to Sunday, it doesn't matter. And even through the whole of this coronavirus thing, in fact, I'm probably more attentive to my routine than I've ever been before, purely because I knew that maybe this wasn't quite as good. Therefore, I was going to be tempted to do things, get out of my routine and the habit. So I get up early, 5:30, 6 o'clock. The very first thing I'll do is I'll have a pint of lemon and water. I then do a very sort of brief, like it's sort of 5-10 minutes sort of breathing, meditative sort of process I go through. And then from there, I then go out and exercise, whether that's on the bike trainer, or go for a run with a dog, whatever. I'll do my half an hour, 45 minutes. I then come back in, and then my breakfast is, because I do intermittent fasting, so my breakfast is a mug of bulletproof coffee. And that's a whole new discussion as well. And then at that stage, then my youngest is generally starting to get awake, so he's getting up. And so then that's my time sort of over. But at that stage, I'm at least prepared for the day. I'll probably do a wee bit of reading as well before that, maybe do some little bits and pieces of work. But that's, to me, if I get those sort of hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning, it just sets me up for the day. Once I've done that, then the rest of the day is easy, because you've also achieved something as well. And I know if I don't exercise, like I used to never be able to exercise in the morning, when the kids were really, really young. And I just realize now that there's too many distractions, there's too many things that take over, and you lose that. So I think if everyone, all your listeners, like literally, if they can just develop a simple routine in the morning, it would make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. And that's it. And people will find different times of the day to exercise, but I agree, like first thing in the morning. I mean, I know that there are definitely different physiological benefits for training, different types of training at different points in the day. But if you're going to look on just setting up your mentality for the day, it makes sense to get something physical done. Get something. It doesn't. And what we know about the brain. The brain essentially needs there's 3 essential things it needs on a daily basis in order to actually function properly. Oxygen, pretty much no one's going to stop themselves from absorbing that unless they really are going to try and hold their breath for a very long time. Glucose, which most people are absorbing from some sort of food. Even if you're only eating a very fat-based diet, your body is still able to take those compounds and break it and make it into glucose. And the last thing we know is it needs stimulation. The brain has to be stimulated. And one of the easiest ways to get very large volumes of stimulation to your brain and your nerves is to move. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out and run marathons. It could be like a yoga or a stretching routine, but moving. It could even just be a brisk walk. But we know that that's vital. It's vital for people's healthy brain and nerve function. And without it, we're going to see deteriorations in people's brain and nerve function.
No, I completely, like, movement is life, as they say. But actually, I suppose also with the exercise, even, aerobic exercise is one thing, but we also need an element of strength in there as well. That we do have to do a little bit of lifting weight, and it doesn't matter. Like, it could be gardening, could be anything. But we need to get sort of both aspects. But I suppose just as society as a whole is just, and I think this is probably it's going to be a good reset and wake up for an awful lot of people, because a lot of people get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, they drive straight to work, and they're at work the whole time. So hopefully this whole thing may just make them reappraise things and actually realize, what, we got to rethink things through, because you only get one bite at this, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's also interesting what you were saying about the because the resistance-based exercise has got so much, especially for females. And this is my experience, and I know nowadays it is shifting. I've seen a massive shift. I remember because I worked in leisure before I became a chiropractor. So that was what I was doing before I in fact, I actually continued to work in leisure whilst I was studying. That's what basically paid my bills whilst I was a student. And you used to never see girls in the resistance-based area. And ironically, they're the ones that are most susceptible to osteoporosis, which is one of the major things that you can prevent by lifting things, because you have to cause that micro stress on tissues in order for your tissues to adapt. And this is what we know, is that it's that adaptability to the environment, and obviously setting up your environment mentally, physically, and then obviously you, like you said, you fast and stuff in the morning, but setting up that chemical process for your body. You know, you're already hitting 3 of your arms of the chiropractic arms pretty much first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's great. Amazing. Look, it's nice to hear that chiropractors are practicing what they preach. And actually, it's funny because intermittent fasting and bulletproof coffee is something that has popped up in a lot of my conversations with many of the chiropractors we've had on the show so far. So I think most of our listeners already know what bulletproof coffee is now. So
my confession is that actually it's become too much of an addiction, really, and because I love it, you know. So whilst I do intermittent fasting, it's more a case of that's just because I've had my bulletproof coffee rather than the other way around, you know. I love it. It's great.
I'm the same. I intermittently fast. I mean, I don't drink bulletproof coffee, but I do drink a coffee in the morning. Yeah, I do drink a coffee, but to be honest, I haven't eaten still. Like, my first meal will be after this, so I normally do about 4 to 6 hours. Yeah, amazing. So look, I'm aware that obviously we can understand that chiropractors generally do take care of our health, but obviously this is really for our patients. And so what we want to do is be able to really instill some value in for them to take home maybe a message of something that they can action. So maybe you have some tips or hints of some ways that our patients could potentially take some action today and improve their health starting from today by giving them some easy to-dos or steps to do that.
I suppose, again, great question. I think when people are talking about changing something, we need 3 things: an awareness, a willingness, and an ability. I'm going to take it back a step further, really, before the awareness, because to me, we have to, we can all go on a quick diet, we can all do a quick exercise program, but to develop a habit requires complete understanding from that. And that's what I said at the beginning, that hopefully the whole thing that we get from this whole coronavirus thing is that we can basically start, I suppose, asking different questions. And so for me, it's really changing people's mindset rather than actually giving, because we've all been given lists of things to do. But if we can change the mindset first, then you're more likely to actually take action on those steps that we all know we should do. We all know we need to exercise. We all know we need to have a proper diet and all those things. But I don't think people fundamentally realize why they need to do it. And so to me, I suppose it's just the one question I suppose I'd get people to ask is sort of really, right. So rather than asking, why do we get sick? We should be asking, well, what makes us healthy? And that's a very, very different question that leads to a totally different conversation. And, like, just take the coronavirus, why is the vast majority of the population who contract this virus able to survive without even batting an eye really from there? If everything's down to the virus, we should all be affected the same way, but we're not. So it's down to the individual. And you mentioned something earlier on about, how the body's adapting to stress and things like that. And that to me, that's the fundamental thing with it. Whereas I suppose traditionally we've been, I suppose, led to assume that the reason why we're all getting sick is because of our genes. It's because of the bad germs, and it's because of bad luck. Now, the reality is our genes haven't changed in 40,000 years. The germs, as you mentioned earlier on, germs have been around for millions of years, and bad luck, well, I don't subscribe to that anyway. So for everyone listening, I suppose the biggest thing is what they need to really start realizing is that there's only 2 reasons why we get sick. And one of them is toxicity, and the second one is deficiency. So you're either toxic in something or you're deficient in something, and there's no other reason for it. And those toxicity, deficiency can then be, applied to any facet of your life. So in the office, what we use the acronym DRESS. So D for diet, R for rest, E for exercise, S for stress management, so things like meditation, and then S for spinal health. So you can apply that toxicity, deficiency to those 5 factors. And if you're looking at each one and you're improving each one by a little bit, well, that's going to have a profound effect on your health. But it really, I think that's the biggest thing, is that we you know, healthcare has taught us to basically just live our lives from crisis to crisis to crisis. And we're not taking responsibility for that. We're not, you know, we're just relying on someone else. We're being disempowered because of that. Whereas we need to actually wake up and actually realize, you know what? It's our responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. It's our responsibility. And that's really all we can do.
That's a really good word that you use as well, is responsibility. Because the only person that is ever responsible for someone's health is themselves. And you know, it was you said earlier about playing God. You know, no chiropractor can physically play God. You know, like when the chiropractor takes credit for all of the changes in their patient's health, that's when their chiropractor has lost his way, essentially, because I mean the reality of it is that, yeah, okay, maybe the chiropractor applied a therapy or technique and the tissue has changed. However, it was that person's physiology, it's the, you know, the chemistry, the biology that's going on inside of that person. Like we say, it's that healing response. It's that almost an intelligent response that the body has all of that potential inside. It just sometimes needs a little bit of encouragement. But it wasn't the chiropractor that healed people. It was the body that healed people. We just need to, like you say, remove the interference, retune the piano, retune the car, you know, service, make sure that it's, you know, the components are working properly.
Totally. Yeah, like you know, cut the arm of a living person and cut the arm of a dead person, you know, the dead person ain't going to heal. Doesn't matter what the hell you put on it, because as you say, there is no intelligence, there's no life force, there's nothing there. Whereas you cut the arm of the living person, yes, they have the potential to heal. And all our potential is slightly different, but what we can do is try and improve and increase our potential so that we're at least, you know, living our lives to our optimum, that's all that we can do. That's all anyone can do.
And it's interesting that what you said as well, because it's a potential as well. You know, they use the term potential, and someone described this to me that, you know, different people, and it was like you said about luck as well. You know, some people go, oh, I got sick because it was bad luck. And you know, the thing is that everybody that's exposed to some level of stress, like obviously you presented differently with your dress. If your D is toxic and your R is toxic and your E is toxic and both your S's are toxic, guess what? Health is going to go down. Health is going to go. And some people have got almost like a higher level of robustness. However, it doesn't matter how robust you are. Eventually, if you keep doing things, it's eventually going to tip over. And I almost say that, you know, someone might be much more resilient, but if you think about it, you know, some people are born with a sink and some people are born with a bathtub. If you keep the tap on and keep the plug in, it doesn't matter how big your capacity is, eventually you're going to blow.
Exactly. It's so true. It is, you know, it really, it's exactly that. And just, you know, also the thing with health is it doesn't come with any guarantee. You know, you could live the perfect life, but still get struck down with something. That's it. All you can do is give your body the best chance. And I suppose that's the thing that we know is that, you know, if you do enough of the right things, it gives you a heck of a lot of chance of avoiding most of the bad stuff. You know, so you're just making let's say you're swinging the odds more in your favor if you do more of the good things. That's certainly for sure.
Excellent. Look, I think there's probably a lot that people could take action on.
Those things, yeah.
There's a lot of
good. Yeah.
We've got a lot of action steps. So no one action steps. We've got to be we're going to go everything. Brilliant. Look, so I just want to pick your brain. So obviously you've now been in practice for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
25 years. And so there's probably a lot of things that you've learned along the way. Now, I love asking this question, especially for people that have been in practice for 25 years, because you've learned so much more than someone that's potentially been in practice for maybe only a year or two. And I call this the Terminator question, because in Terminator, he gets the chance to go back and report back to himself what was happening in the future, and say, look, you really need to stop this from happening, otherwise this is going to occur. So if you could go back to Ed when he was at the ACC, or maybe there's a certain point in your career where you could go back and go, actually, do you know what? I really wish someone had told me this earlier.
I suppose there's lots of things I wish I could tell myself back then. I think the biggest thing that I've learned, again, the longer I've been in practice, like I've now been here for 25 years. So I've seen some patients, the whole time through those 25 years. And what I realized was that I have done a lousy job of educating my patients. And that, and Ryan talks about, in sort of when we talk about, doing information talks and stuff like that, the Latin word, or doctor comes from the Latin word docere, meaning to teach and to educate. And that really is a fundamental role that we need to sort of take on board. And I think I realized the longer I've been in practice is how lousy and how bad a job that we've done actually educating them. Because going back to what we said at the beginning, as a chiropractor, I thought it was our job to fix everyone. And so they basically relied on me to fix them. And when I couldn't fix them, well, then it was my fault, not their fault. And I think that probably is the one biggest thing that I realized that we've got to do more of, is actually to actually teach and talk and have a different conversation. Because the conversation we're having here is not the conversation that's going on outside these four walls.
Yeah,
because the conversation is there that we're all deficient in drugs or surgery, or genes, and that's not what it should be about. And it's just trying to at least give people a different perspective to think of it, a different perspective, a different way to approach it. And that would be the biggest thing. And then, as I mentioned as well, the other thing I would certainly tell myself is that you don't be the hero. Don't try and fix everyone.
I really love that, and it's really interesting what you say about, obviously, the deficiencies in drugs. Lack of health is not a deficiency in a drug. Having high blood pressure was not as a result of not having enough beta blockers or not having enough statins, or and the thing is having high blood cholesterols and needing statins was not as a result of having a lack of statins. It was a result of changes in, like we were talking about earlier, the environment. If you're eating the wrong foods and eating very high sugar and eating the wrong fats, because I'm not going to say not eating fats, because fats are obviously essential, but eating the wrong fats, that's when your cholesterol starts to change. And that's when we start to see the change in health expression that we're seeing at such a high level in the community nowadays. And like we said, it's the responsibility not just of the chiropractor. And it was another interesting thing you said about genes. Someone once explained genes to me like this, and actually I think it was Bruce Lipton, really intelligent guy. He got laughed out of his office for turning around and saying, I don't think genes are the cause of disease. I think the environment's the cause of the disease, which turns the genes on. And so he described it a little bit like this, in that a gene is essentially like the blueprint to a house that an architect would then that would draw up. And then if you have the environment that is bad, it essentially sends the builders in to collect the gene and then takes it out and switches it on, and they build the house. But if you never send the builder in to collect the blueprint, the house never gets built and that thing never gets expressed. So you might have a gene for cancer or obesity or whatever any of these things are to express these health flaws. But if you never switch them on, the builders never come in.
But I remember actually seeing something on that there was a gene for a hangover. And you sort of think, like, okay, how stupid are we getting where, how do you get a hangover? Well, you drink too much alcohol. So come on, and this is where the whole thing gets just totally crazy. We're trying to just excuse the state that we're in by finding these things. Just absolutely. But Bruce Lipton stuff's brilliant.
I love that. I could do with having the gene for not having a hangover. Otherwise known as abstinence from alcohol.
Yeah, school children is the best cure for that. I can tell you that.
Look, I've really appreciated your time and some of the conversation. And look, we've had some, I think, some brilliant gems that have come out of the conversation. Look, I want to give you the opportunity to give people some contact, maybe of ways that they could get in touch with you. Maybe people who have listened to this and they want to ask you some additional questions on some of the stuff that you've spoken about. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, maybe you can tell them a little bit of like maybe where your website is or some ways that people can get in touch with you. Well,
the fact that I'm so high tech, as you were alluding to earlier. Facebook, you can get on Facebook, my Facebook page. My practice is Kilworth Chiropractic, so Kilworth. You get it through there, or just Ed Bates. Email edbatesdc@gmail.com. Or what other ways are there? Pigeon post.
Email and Facebook nowadays, and that's
that's all you need. That's it. I do have a YouTube channel, but I haven't quite got it as organized as yours yet, so we're still working on that one. And that's just Ed Bates DC.
It's amazing.
That's it. Yeah.
Hey, look, coming from someone that said they would never know how to set up a video or a camera to get on and actually set up a YouTube channel, I think that's an amazing, amazing accomplishment. So look, and I'm hats off to you. Like 25 years in practice and still learning. And this is the great thing about, we obviously have regulation that we have to do 30 hours of training a year. And I know that during this period, I've easily exceeded that in probably a week on many of the occasions of these weeks. So look, I'm going to ask you one last question. We spoke about earlier, it's the wow moment. So we call it the parting words of wisdom, So maybe you have like a quote or something that you like to live your life by, or something that you feel like someone could learn a lot from, or a quote that you use.
I suppose you touched on it when we both touched on it when we were talking about stress and how to adapt. So the quote I want to leave you with is from Charles Darwin, and his quote was, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is most adaptable to change." Because that in ultimately, when it comes down to, that's exactly what it is. It doesn't matter the stress. Like, we all face stress. We all have emotional, chemical, and physical stress. And it's not the stress that matters, but it's how you adapt to it is the key, because it's how you adapt to it will define how your body responds to that stress. And that really, I suppose that's the one thing I can leave you with.
It's amazing. Hey, look, I've had great fun talking to you this morning. This afternoon now, sorry. I've absolutely great fun. I know that people are going to have, like I say, got some great value, some great tips. Like I say, we'll put all of the details for Ed in the descriptions below. So if you do want to get in touch, that's how you can find him. Like I say, thank you so much for jumping on the show with us today. I've had great fun.
That's my first podcast, by the way.
Yeah, look, podcasts. Everyone has this kind of fear of jumping onto a podcast. I've asked a few people, and they've got this fear of jumping on because they think I'm gonna torture them over video or something. But it's really just, we're just two people having a conversation about something that we're very passionate about. And for other people, they can learn a lot from these kinds of conversations. So again, I just want to say thank you for jumping on with us. And, I'm sure that our listeners will really, truly appreciate some of the content that they've got here.
You're so welcome. Thanks a million. Yeah. Thank you very much.
This is another episode of Coffee with the Chiropractor with your host, Patrick Hogg. And we are going to see you all on the other side. We'll see you guys soon.